The story begins with CEO Guyan, who wakes up startled from a strange dream. In the dream, he finds himself dressed in old clothes, facing a mysterious woman. He scolds her for running away without telling him, even though they had agreed to escape together and get married. Guyan wakes up terrified, confused by this odd vision. His assistant enters the room to remind him of the busy day ahead. Before the assistant can even sit down, Guyan quickly stops him, insisting that his clothes are full of bacteria. It becomes clear that Guyan suffers from a form of obsessive cleanliness. The assistant mutters to himself and leaves the room. On the other side, the heroine, Yuxian, appears in a luxury car, her hair flowing in the wind. She arrives at a grand mansion, and for a moment, it seems as if she might be a wealthy young woman. But the truth is revealed when she helps a drunken man out of the car and leaves him at the mansion. She then climbs onto her small motorbike, showing that she actually works by delivering anything and everything, struggling with poverty and in need of money. At that moment, Yuxian receives a new order. She must deliver a bouquet of flowers, and the person receiving it will be dressed in black. Meanwhile, Guyan finishes arranging his clothes, and soon his sister, Gumu, greets him with a lovely bouquet. Yuxian reaches the location just as Guyan steps out of his home, holding the flowers in his hands. Without hesitation, she takes the bouquet from him. Guyan freezes for a moment as soon as he sees her. A sudden pain strikes his chest, and he presses his hand against it, his vision of her blurring. Realization hits him, and he rushes after her, trying to catch up. The man who was meant to receive the flowers stands by, watching the whole scene in surprise. Since Yuxian did not stop, Guyan jumped onto the scooter behind her. The extra weight caused both of them to fall hard to the ground. Gumu and Xiao, the assistant, witnessed the entire scene and immediately pulled out their phones, eager to capture the moment before it slipped away. Guyan pointed at Yuxian, insisting that she was crazy. At the same time, Yuxian remembered that she had noticed another man holding a bouquet of flowers. She rushed to apologize to him, trying to calm him down, but the instant she touched him, his heartbeat raced wildly, and he begged her to stay away. Later, Guyan headed to a grand conference hall to announce that his family's company would take full a major sculpture project. After delivering his speech, his business partner introduced him to his daughter. She extended her hand politely, but Guyan, nervous and uneasy, failed to respond. Just before the situation grew more awkward, his friend Linwan appeared, rescuing him from the moment. Linwan, a journalist, had helped him many times before, and Guyan thanked her for stepping in. However, she reminded him that he owed her an interview. Guyan simply dismissed the idea, since he never agreed to give interviews to the press. By coincidence, the location where Yuxian had been assigned to deliver the bouquet of flowers turned out to be the very same venue hosting Guyan's press conference. As she made her way inside, Guyan was leaving the hall. The two collided unexpectedly. To prevent her from falling, Guyan caught her quickly in his arms. When Yuxian looked up, she realized it was the same man she had encountered earlier. For Guyan, the moment was even stranger. The sight of her face triggered blurry memories of a woman who resembled her, but this vision was not painted, it was sculpted. The confusion and the pain in his chest struck him again, and in a sudden reaction, he let Yuxian slip from his arms and fall to the ground. At that moment, Xiao arrived and saw Yuxian on the ground while Guyan was holding his hand, which had been scratched during the incident. Xiao immediately grabbed Guyan's hand, insisting that he needed to go to the hospital before bacteria could spread into the wound. Yuxian overheard their conversation in shock, then shouted at Guyan for letting her fall. She assumed he had dropped her only because of that small scratch. Feeling guilty, she offered to cover the cost of his treatment. But Xiao turned to her and explained that she could never afford the expenses of the hospital where Guyan received his care. He whispered the amount in her ear, leaving her stunned. Yuxian admitted to Yina that even if she worked her entire life, she would never be able to earn that much. As Guyan walked away, he overheard Yuxian complaining to her best friend, Yina, saying that he would only make her hate men instead of allowing her to dream of love and marriage. Guyan stopped immediately at those words. A memory of his grandfather surfaced, reminding him of a phone call in which the old man had insisted that Guyan needed to marry and provide the family with heirs. At the same time, Guyan recalled that Yuxian looked strikingly similar to one of the old paintings hanging in his home. The resemblance was so uncanny that he began to suspect Yuxian had conspired with his grandfather, intentionally appearing everywhere he went in order to trap him. Outside, Guyan's thoughts grew even darker. He remembered the painting more clearly and recalled that the girl in it was named Qi. The resemblance between Yuxian and Qi was unbelievable. Then the realization struck him again, the woman from his dream was also named Qi, and she looked exactly like Yuxian. Disturbed, Guyan ordered his assistant Baibin to collect every detail about Yuxian, determined to uncover who she really was. Later, Guyan visited his therapist. He confessed that he had met a girl who looked almost identical to the woman who haunted his dreams. Not only that, but she resembled one of his ancient ancestors, whose portrait hung in his family home. In his dreams, he always saw himself protecting her. The therapist asked why he didn't simply give the girl a chance, since she appeared to be tied to him through both dream and history. Guyan, however, dismissed the idea, convinced that it was nothing more than one of his grandfather's schemes. At the same time, Xiao went to see Guyan's grandfather. He reported that the girl the old man had chosen for Guyan had failed to win him over, but assured him it didn't matter, since Guyan had already crossed paths with another girl that very day. He then showed him a photo of Guyan and Yuxian lying on the ground after their fall. The grandfather's eyes lit up the moment he saw her, declaring that she was the very spirit he had seen in old images, and that he was now certain she would become Guyan's wife. When he learned she was poor and worked as a delivery girl, he hesitated for a moment, but quickly brushed it aside, convinced that everything could be fixed. Without delay, Bai Bin, the family's trusted aide, went to Yina's flower shop and placed a massive order on behalf of the company. Yina could hardly believe it, while Yuxian was overjoyed. At that very moment, Bai Bin pretended to receive a phone call, announcing that the family needed a driver for the day. Yuxian eagerly stepped in, explaining that she worked as both a courier and a driver, and that she could take the job. She was thrilled at the chance to earn a good amount of money. Climbing into the luxury car, Yuxian stared around her in awe, secretly wishing she could one day own something like it. While she admired the vehicle, Guyan entered and sat down, leaving her shocked to realize it was the same man she had already encountered. Guyan, on the other hand, was less surprised, half expecting this to be another one of his grandfather's schemes. The two clashed quickly, and Guyan insulted her with his words. Yuxian, furious, took her revenge by driving recklessly fast, leaving Guyan terrified of her speed. When they finally arrived at Guyan's mansion and entered the garage, Yuxian was stunned by the sheer number of modern luxury cars parked there. In her distraction, she almost lost her balance, but Guyan caught her again at the last second. As always, the moment triggered pain in his chest, while Yuxian grew flustered and pulled away from him, muttering under her breath in anger. Guyan left and walked inside, but Yuxian cried out in frustration as she suddenly remembered she had left her scooter in the car. Yuxian entered the mansion, only to find a man standing in her way. She quickly explained who she was and what had happened with the car. The man introduced himself as the head butler. Seeing her as a kind girl, he decided to guide her toward Guyan's private room so the matter could be resolved. Once she left, however, the butler called Guyan's grandfather to inform him that everything was unfolding exactly as planned. Yuxian climbed upstairs and began searching for the car key. Guyan suddenly appeared, blocking her from taking it. He held the key firmly in his hand, teasing her and refusing to let go. Then he hid it in one of his palms, challenging her to guess the right one. Yuxian noticed that he wore bandages on both hands, the injured one and the uninjured one, which made her suspect he suffered from obsessive habits. Eventually, Yuxian managed to snatch the key away from him by force. Guyan, annoyed, tried to pull her back, but all he caught was her hair tie. Her long hair spilled over his hands, leaving him tense and overwhelmed by the strange pounding in his chest. Flustered, he released her, allowing her to leave. The next day, while Yuxian was at Yina's flower shop, Guyan's grandfather walked in. He told her that he needed her urgently and asked for her help. Yuxian looked at Yina, who gestured that she was just as confused and had no idea what was going on. Meanwhile, in another scene, a young man named Dong sat in his office. His assistant entered and handed him a detailed report about Guyan's recent activities and the sculptures his company had been working on. When Guyan left the company, he unexpectedly found Yuxian waiting outside. His heartbeat quickened, as it always did in her presence, but this time it happened just from the sight of her. Yuxian revealed that his grandfather had officially appointed her as his private driver. Still resentful over what had happened the previous day, she climbed onto her scooter and announced that she would leave him to drive his own car, since she would be paid regardless of whether she worked or not. She then rode off, leaving Guyan unsettled. Elsewhere, Guyan's grandfather sat alone in a room of the mansion. He unveiled a massive painting of a woman who looked exactly like Yuxian and declared that she was the very spirit depicted in the artwork. Holding an old family book, he proclaimed that Yuxian was the phantom bride of their lineage and that Guyan was now fulfilling the promise made by the men of the family for generations. Meanwhile, Yuxian rode along the street while Guyan followed in his car at a steady pace, unable to stop watching her scooter. Suddenly, another vehicle nearly struck her. Without thinking, Guyan swerved, blocking the car with his own and taking the impact himself. When he rushed to check on her, Yuxian coldly thanked him before riding away, leaving him stunned. Xiao soon arrived, worried about Guyan. Upon hearing what had happened, he muttered that this was the first time Guyan had ever protected someone. He asked if Yuxian was safe, and Guyan, noticing Xiao already knew her name, became convinced that his grandfather was behind everything. Frustrated, he handed Xiao the car and ordered him to handle the accident and pay the other driver's damages, while he walked away. The next morning, Yuxian woke to a phone call from Guyan's company. An employee informed her that she was needed at the office to replace every plant with fresh flowers. When she arrived, the staff gave her precise instructions. Each pot had to be spaced at a specific distance apart, all lined up perfectly. Yuxian laughed at the absurdity, calling Guyan truly sick in the head. Carrying out the orders, she eventually reached Guyan's office without realizing he was inside. At that moment, he was in the middle of changing clothes. When he stepped out and found her standing there, she screamed in shock. Guyan quickly covered her mouth with his hand to avoid a scene. Once dressed, he sat before her, accusing her of playing games, demanding that she drop the act and admit her intentions. Yuxian, however, stood firm. She explained that he was mistaken. She was not circling around him for any personal reason. His grandfather had hired her officially, and she was there only for money, not for him. She had no interest in chasing him, no intention of loving him. She was there for her work, and if he needed anything, he should contact her professionally. As she was on her way out, she encountered the driver and expressed her gratitude to him, for he had been the first to give her the chance to work with their company and to take flowers from them. She felt deeply thankful to him and to the grandfather for offering her this opportunity. Guyan, meanwhile, observed them from a distance, listening to everything. At the same time, the grandfather received the joyful news about the situation between Guyan and Yuxian, and he laughed like a child, already imagining their future together. In the next scene, Guyan was seen sitting in his sculpture workshop, dressed in his work clothes. Yet, as soon as he held the carving tools in his hand, his fingers trembled, and he quickly let them fall, revealing that he was no longer able to sculpt as he once did. Yuxian, after finishing her work, returned once more to the flower shop, where Yina remarked that things did not seem natural and that something strange lay behind all of this. She reminded Yuxian not to forget her if she ever managed to find herself a rich and handsome husband. At that moment, Bai Bin entered the place, and Yuxian thanked him. It was revealed that she had invited him for lunch as a gesture of gratitude for his help. Yina, meanwhile, gazed at him with full admiration. Shortly after, the grandfather entered Guyan's workshop accompanied by Xiao. He inquired about Yuxian, but Guyan reproached him, telling him he was too old for such childish tricks in trying to arrange a marriage. He felt disheartened that his grandfather would even use his assistant to report news about him. Yet the grandfather explained that although he had once tried to bring a girl for Guyan, his business partner's daughter, it was never meant to be. Fate itself had brought Yuxian into Guyan's life, and all he was doing was lending fate a helping hand. Hearing this, Guyan felt guilty for the harsh words he had spoken to Yuxian the night before. Meanwhile, Yuxian had bought a single pizza for Bai Bin, herself, and Yina to share. She felt embarrassed, for it was all she could afford since they had no money. Yina teased her, insisting she should only focus on winning a wealthy, handsome lover. But Bai Bin suddenly rose, phone in hand, and announced that an urgent problem had arisen at the company and that he had to leave at once. Soon it became clear that rumors had spread about Yuxian and Guyan, accompanied by a photograph taken of them at the moment when she had almost fallen and he had caught her. Yuxian began receiving messages from journalists as well as from those who called themselves her friends, people who now demanded money from her, simply because she had become associated with a wealthy man like Guyan. The spreading rumors left her deeply troubled. She reached out to Guyan, insisting they needed to meet and find a solution. Disguised so that no one would recognize her, she met him, and Guyan explained that the only way to put an end to the gossip was for her to officially begin her work with him. In that way, people would see their presence together as something natural, without scandal. Yet Yuxian refused to comply unless he admitted his wrongdoing and apologized for accusing her of conspiring with his grandfather to entrap him. She made it clear she would never work with him otherwise. Guyan reluctantly offered her an apology, though his tone carried an air of pride. Afterwards, he asked her to drive him home. But as soon as they stepped outside, they were surrounded by more reporters, and the rumors intensified, now claiming that the two of them had been seen together at a nightclub. Soon, their circle of acquaintances began to voice their own suspicions, convinced that there was indeed something going on between them. The following day, Guyan and Yuxian headed to a dress shop, as there was a press conference scheduled and she needed to appear at his side as his assistant, or, more precisely, his driver. Yuxian protested that she would not be able to drive comfortably in a dress, but Guyan insisted. Like in a scene from a drama, he began selecting gowns for her, until she finally settled on an elegant black dress. The moment Guyan saw her wearing it, he was struck speechless by her beauty. When they left the boutique, Yuxian was surprised to see Bai Bin waiting, insisting that he would drive them himself. She found it strange, for she had not yet formally taken up her role as a driver, and she suspected Guyan was planning something. Once they arrived at the event, Guyan introduced Yuxian to everyone as his personal assistant rather than his chauffeur, leaving her astonished. Later, as she hurried across the hall, struggling to walk gracefully in high heels, Guyan took her hand and steadied her to prevent her from falling. As they moved from one hall to another, they suddenly encountered Gumu. Just as Gumu was about to remark that Yuxian looked like a fairy, Guyan silenced her before she could utter a word. A little later, Dong entered the venue, already established as one of Guyan's rivals. The two men sat together, attempting to maintain a civilized discussion, yet the exchange ended in conflict. Before leaving, Dong revealed that he knew Guyan's secret, pulling from his pocket photographs taken during the press conference where Guyan had announced his major project. Guyan then returned to the hall with Yuxian, where the crowd was already dancing. He asked her to join him on the dance floor, but her nerves held her back. The moment was interrupted when Lin Wan, the journalist, approached and asked Guyan to dance with her instead. Guyan dismissed the request, pointing out that he had already asked his assistant to dance with him and that he would only share the floor with her. Yuxian felt deeply embarrassed as Guyan took her hand and led her into the dance. She grew anxious, insisting that she could not dance and that she would only humiliate him, yet he reassured her. Once she placed her hand in his and began to move, something stirred within her, fragments of memory surfaced, showing herself in old-fashioned clothing, dancing in another time. Overcome by confusion, she abruptly let go of Guyan's hand and told him she could not continue. Later, Guyan sat with a client who expressed his wish for all the statues in his company to be created exclusively by Guyan's firm. Guyan eagerly agreed, though it was soon revealed that Dong's company had also been pursuing the very same project. Meanwhile, Bai Bin drove Yuxian home. She asked him to stop for dinner along the way, and during the meal she began to drink, eventually becoming tipsy as she spoke about her life and personal struggles. When the evening ended, Bai Bin placed his coat over her shoulders and took her safely to her building. As Yuxian stepped into the elevator, she sensed movement behind her. Terrified, she struck out with a kick, only to feel her foot caught by Guyan. She was startled to see him, and after her initial shock she invited him inside, demanding to know why he had come to her home. Before he could answer, the doorbell rang. 4 chefs entered, carrying an abundance of dishes, which they set upon her table. Yuxian was stunned, but Guyan explained that she had left the party without eating, so he had come to provide her with dinner. Yuxian, already full from her meal with Bai Bin, struggled to find the words to explain. Her stomach felt uncomfortably heavy, but Guyan remained insistent, making sure she ate until he was satisfied. After leaving her home, Guyan stood beneath her window, gazing upward. In that moment, he realized how strikingly she resembled the painting and sculpture displayed in his family's house. His memory drifted back to his childhood, to the times when his grandfather had told him that their ancestors had created that very sculpture, insisting it belonged solely to their family and that no one else could ever reproduce it. Guyan longed deeply to carve it again himself, but he knew that he no longer possessed the ability to sculpt as he once did. The following day, Guyan visited his therapist once more. He confessed that he was beginning to accept Yuxian more openly, and that he felt she might be the girl his family had been searching for all these years, the one who could restore his lost ability to sculpt. His therapist urged him to remain by Yuxian's side and never let her go. The next morning, Guyan took Yuxian to a mountain, telling her they would climb its peak as a form of exercise. Yuxian protested, reminding him that she was only his driver and had no interest in mountain climbing. Guyan then tempted her with the promise of a generous bonus if she agreed to accompany him. Yuxian, motivated by the money, accepted, declaring she would do anything as long as she was paid. As they ascended, Guyan handed all the bags to Yuxian, leaving her to carry them while he kept hold of his sculpting tools, searching for a rock suitable for carving. Yuxian, trailing behind him, imagined what he might look like if she were to give him all the bags to carry instead. The thought amused her, and she burst into laughter. Guyan noticed her smiling, assumed she was happy to be with him, and felt a spark of joy himself. He approached her and took the bags from her shoulders. When they finally reached the summit, Yuxian began to tease him playfully. At one point, she picked up a large earthworm and placed it in his palm, believing it would be a harmless joke. But Guyan, afflicted with obsessive concerns about cleanliness, recoiled in panic, shouting and shaking his hand desperately to get rid of it. Yuxian tried to calm him, yet in their frantic movements they both stumbled, tumbling down the mountainside together until they landed at the base. Yuxian eventually regained consciousness, only to find herself in an unfamiliar house, her body aching from the fall. As she rose with difficulty, she came face to face with an elderly woman who owned a nearby home. Guyan had carried her there after she had fainted from the accident. He called Xiao, asking him to come and fetch them, but at that time Xiao was busy helping Yina in the flower shop since Yuxian had been absent that day. When Xiao learned that Guyan and Yuxian were stranded in a mountain house, he quickly told Yina and informed the grandfather, who was delighted by the situation. Xiao, however, pretended that he could not leave to assist Guyan. This left Guyan to dine with the elderly woman and her husband. They served them drinks, and as the evening passed, both Guyan and Yuxian began to drink until Guyan lost consciousness entirely. In that state, Guyan dreamed once again of the girl who looked like Yuxian. He saw himself before her in old-fashioned clothes, offering her a hairpin and gently placing it in her hair. He leaned closer, on the verge of kissing her, but woke abruptly before he could. Still heavily intoxicated, Guyan staggered into Yuxian's room with a pencil in his hand, pressing it into her hair as if it were the hairpin from his dream. He repeated the very words he had spoken to the girl in his vision. Since he had been unable to kiss her in the dream, he decided to do so in reality, leaning toward Yuxian and kissing her. Shocked, Yuxian quickly pushed him back onto the bed. Overwhelmed, she blushed deeply and began to cry, for that had been the very first kiss of her life. The next morning, when Guyan awoke, Yuxian chose not to mention anything about the previous night. They went out for a walk in the mountains and came across a workshop where stones from the mountain were cut and prepared for sculpture. When Guyan asked the owner if he could take some stones, the men explained that the workshop earned too little to remain open and that they were planning to shut it down. Guyan then told him that he owned a sculpture company and wanted to arrange for a supply of stone from the mountain. Hearing this, Yuxian felt that Guyan was, at his core, a kind and compassionate man. Later, Guyan went to the clay pit near the quarry and began flattening the soft earth beneath his feet. Yuxian approached, watching him, but stumbled in the mud. Before she could fall, Guyan caught her, and she landed in his arms. The memory of the kiss from the night before returned to her mind, and she grew intensely flustered. She quickly pulled away from him. Guyan, dressed in clothes he had borrowed from one of the workers, later rode in the car with Yuxian. He reproached her for pushing him away, unable to understand why she acted so strangely. Yuxian, in turn, tried to sense whether he remembered anything about the kiss. Yet Guyan had no recollection. Only when he returned to his room and caught sight of himself in the mirror did a faint memory stir, Yuxian's tears, her voice crying out that it had been her first kiss. With that, Guyan pieced together the truth and understood the reason behind her anger. The following day, Yuxian drove Guyan to the sculpture studio where he worked. Seeing the sculpting tools laid out before her, she asked him to show her one of his works. But as Guyan lifted the tools in his hand, his fingers trembled, and he found himself unable to carve anything. Looking at her, he decided instead that it would be better to teach her. He guided her to the table, placed the tools in her hand, and wrapped his own hand around hers to direct her movements. The moment he did, the trembling in his hands vanished, and he was able to sculpt properly once more. For Yuxian, however, the experience was the opposite. She felt overwhelmed with nervousness, her entire body tense. Unable to bear it, she abruptly rose, excused herself, and hurried away. A little later, Xiao entered the room, and Guyan told him everything that had happened. Xiao advised him that it would be best to stay close to Yuxian at all times, since she was the only one capable of helping him with the problem of his trembling hand. Guyan explained that she was already his driver, but Xiao insisted that this was not enough. She needed to be with him constantly, so that whenever he needed her, she would be there. With just her touch, he could overcome his problem. After some time, Yuxian walked into the office and asked Guyan to grant her the rest of the day off because she had a flower delivery order to handle. Guyan reluctantly agreed. When Yuxian went home, she received a message from Bai Bin inviting her to lunch. She accepted, but accidentally sent her reply to Guyan instead of Bai Bin. She quickly corrected the mistake and sent the message again to Bai Bin. Meanwhile, Guyan instructed Xiao to follow her and find out the meaning behind the message. Xiao did as he was told and saw Yuxian with Bai Bin, who also gave her a gift. Later, Yuxian returned to the flower shop with the delivery cart, where Yina told her that Bai Bin seemed very fond of her, kind, and someone she should consider seriously. Yuxian, however, dismissed this suggestion, telling Yina to stop being influenced by romantic dramas. At the same time, Xiao had been secretly taking photos of Yuxian and Bai Bin. He sent them to Guyan and warned him that he had to do something to stop this relationship before it could even begin. On the other side, rumors spread that Gumu was dating Dong, Guyan's rival. When Dong's reaction to the rumors was seen, it became clear that he truly had feelings for Gumu, yet he could not admit them because of his rivalry with Guyan. In Guyan's office, he pressured Xiao, telling him that unless he came up with a solution that would allow him to stay with Yuxian 24 hours a day, he would not pay him his salary. Eventually, Guyan came up with an idea on his own. That evening, he called Yuxian in a rush, pretending to be sick at home and unable to reach anyone. Yuxian hurried to him immediately, only to find him collapsed on the floor. Believing he had a fever, she placed him in bed and cared for him throughout the night. The next morning, Guyan awoke to find Yuxian still by his side, having looked after him without rest. He then explained that the head butler had taken a month-long leave and asked her to stay with him during that time. Yuxian initially refused, but Guyan offered to pay her for her stay, and she quickly agreed, asking when she should move into his house. Later, Yuxian drove him to a private meeting, then told him she would return to her home to collect her belongings before coming back for him. Inside the meeting place, Guyan was approached by a young woman who seemed rather provocative. At the same time, Xiao was sitting in a bar when he received a message from his assistant containing an inappropriate photo of the same woman who was supposed to meet Guyan. Realizing she was trouble, Xiao quickly called Yuxian to ask where she had dropped Guyan off. She gave him the location, and he urged her to hurry there before him. When he caught up with her, he explained that the woman with Guyan was dangerous and that the situation appeared to be a trap designed to create a scandal against Guyan, who in reality was innocent. Together they rushed inside. On their way to the room, Xiao wondered why Yuxian seemed calm instead of angry, but she made it clear there was no reason for anger if Guyan was simply enjoying himself with another woman. When they entered the room, they found Guyan unconscious with the woman beside him. Yuxian immediately struck the woman on the head, knocking her out. They soon heard footsteps approaching, and Xiao suspected that the people behind the plot were coming to catch them in a compromising position. He quickly decided to hide the unconscious woman and asked Yuxian to take her place in bed with Guyan so that if anyone entered, it would look more natural. The plan worked. When the men entered, their leader turned out to be Dong. As they lifted the blanket, they discovered Yuxian with Guyan instead of the woman they had sent. Dong's face showed clear displeasure. At that moment, Guyan regained consciousness, dismissed the intruders, and ordered them to leave his room. He then looked at Yuxian with gratitude, appreciating what she had done. Moved by the situation, he leaned closer to her, but just before he could kiss her, Xiao stepped out of the bathroom and asked if everything was fine, breaking the moment. The next morning, Yuxian arrived at Guyan's home carrying her personal belongings. Once inside, she began laying down her own set of rules and conditions for staying in the house, while Guyan established his as well. Yet that very evening, Guyan broke the first rule of their agreement. He sneaked into her room while she was asleep, took her phone, and erased the list of conditions she had recorded there. On the other side, Bai Bin was seen sitting in front of the carved statue of Qi, speaking softly to it as if promising to take good care of Yuxian and apologizing for not being able to visit often. The reason behind his actions, however, remained a mystery. The next morning, Guyan woke to find Yuxian practicing karate. She confronted him angrily, having discovered what he had done, but dismissed its importance since she had multiple copies of the contract he had torn apart. She then insisted that he call Bai Bin to drive him to work that day because she intended to spend her time with Yina at the flower shop. While the two women were at the shop, a young man suddenly rushed toward Yuxian, calling her name before embracing her tightly. It was revealed that he was her younger brother, Yuan. Meanwhile, Guyan received a call from an important client who wanted him to create all the sculptures for the garden of his grand mansion. Yet there was one condition: Guyan himself had to carve the statues with his own hands. After ending the call, Guyan sank into deep thought, troubled by the demand, for he was incapable of sculpting. He drifted into sleep in his chair and dreamed of a girl trapped somewhere, begging for help. When he awoke, he believed the girl in the dream to be Yuxian, or perhaps her mysterious lookalike who appeared in his visions. He tried to call Yuxian immediately, but she did not answer. At that moment, his assistant sent him a photo of Yuxian with Yuan at the flower shop. Guyan, not knowing the young man's identity, was consumed with jealousy and ordered his assistant to keep watching her. Later, Yuxian decided to take Yuan to her home so he could stay with her, explaining that she was currently living at Guyan's house. On their way, she began to send someone following them. Soon, she caught two men secretly taking photos of her and Yuan. She forced them to hand over their phones before striking them, then demanded to know who they were and why they were there. They confessed that Guyan had sent them. Furious, Yuxian went to Guyan's house with the phone in hand, confronting him about having her followed and photographed without her knowledge. Guyan defended himself by saying he only wanted to ensure her safety. The argument escalated until Guyan tried to seize the phone from her. In the struggle, the two of them fell together, and in the chaos Guyan kissed her by accident. At that very moment, Bai Bin witnessed the scene through the crack of the door, his face darkening with jealousy and anger, before leaving silently. When Yuxian and Guyan returned home from the company, Yuxian called Yina and recounted what had happened, speaking as if it were about a friend rather than herself. But Yina immediately realized the truth and told her that Guyan's feelings for her were obvious and beyond doubt. Yuxian thought deeply about Yina's words, then stepped into the bathroom to take a bath. Lost in thought, she slipped in the tub, injuring her neck badly. Guyan rushed her to the hospital, where it was revealed she had fractured it. Yuxian admitted the pain was overwhelming and asked him to take her home so that Yuan could care for her, but Guyan refused. Instead, he brought her back to his house and insisted on looking after her himself. Yuxian found it hard to believe this sudden concern. She gazed at him in disbelief and asked directly if he was doing this because he liked her. Guyan grew nervous, avoided answering, and excused himself to meet the doctor. When he returned later, he began washing the dishes, quietly pleased by the question she had asked. A smile spread across his face, and Yuxian pointed out that it was the first time she had ever seen him smile. His smile only deepened before he announced he was heading to work. At work, Bai Bin approached Guyan and handed in his resignation without giving any clear explanation. Days later, Yuxian visited Yina after having her cast removed. She told her friend everything that had happened, including the question she had asked Guyan and his evasive response. Yina then promised to create a few plans that would help Yuxian uncover Guyan's true feelings for her. Not long after, Guyan arrived at work, collected Yuxian, and took her back to the hospital. He questioned the doctor about her condition, and the doctor confirmed that she was completely healed and could return to her normal life and work. Guyan brought her back to the office again, but soon overheard her speaking with Bai Bin, who invited her to lunch. When she accepted, Guyan was overwhelmed with jealousy and anger. He began assigning her an excessive amount of work, but Yuxian reminded him that it was her lunch break and insisted on leaving. She also told him not to follow her. Yet when she finally sat down with Bai Bin at the restaurant, Guyan appeared anyway, taking a seat at their table. Yuxian grew puzzled by Guyan's behavior and excused herself to call Yina from the bathroom, asking what his actions might mean. Yina advised her to deliberately provoke his jealousy in order to see whether he truly cared for her. At that very moment, Bai Bin and Guyan were seated together, and Bai Bin suggested that Guyan remained constantly by Yuxian's side because he could no longer return to sculpting. Hearing this remark ignited Guyan's anger, and he abruptly stood up and left. When Yuxian returned to the table, Guyan was gone, and Bai Bin informed her that he had left. Concerned, Yuxian hurried to Guyan's house, but he was not there either, which only deepened her worry. She rushed back to the company, where she found the lights turned off. In a shadowed corner, Guyan sat on the floor, drunk and overwhelmed with sorrow. When Yuxian asked why he was in such a state, Guyan confessed through tears that he could not complete the sculpture project, because his trembling hand made it impossible for him to carve again. The sight of him broken and despairing stirred compassion in her. She tried to help him to his feet so they could return home, but he was far too heavy, collapsing over her until both of them remained lying on the floor through the night. The next morning, Yuxian resolved to help him. She went to his grandfather and asked why Guyan had been unable to return to sculpting. The old man explained that Guyan had suffered a car accident 5 years earlier, injuring his hand. Although his hand had physically healed, the tremor never left him whenever he held his tools, leading many to believe the problem was psychological rather than physical. Later, at the company, Yuxian overheard Guyan speaking with Xiao, declaring his decision to abandon the project altogether. She entered the room and told Guyan she wanted a gift from him. When he asked what she desired, she led him into the sculpture room and requested that he carve a statue for her. Realizing that he had revealed the truth to her while drunk, Guyan demanded she stay out of the matter. But Yuxian insisted that his avoidance would solve nothing, urged him not to surrender, and left. Because he cared for her, and because her disappointment weighed heavily on him, Guyan ran after her. He caught her in a sudden embrace, promising he would do as she asked, that he would try again and not give up. In return, however, he begged her not to abandon him and never to leave his side. Yuxian stood stunned by the unexpected embrace, unable to fully comprehend the depth of his feelings for her. Almost unconsciously, her hand lifted to her cheek, as if trying to make sense of the moment. Yuxian went to the flower shop, where Yina immediately noticed her glowing face and constant smile. Curious, Yina asked what had happened. Yuxian laughed heartily and confessed that Guyan had embraced her that day and asked her not to leave him. Yina was thrilled, reminding her friend that she had told her before Guyan truly loved her. Soon after, Yuxian received a call informing her that she had work to do and needed to leave right away. Meanwhile, at Dong's company, it was revealed that his mother was the official CEO. She scolded him harshly, comparing him to Guyan, who always seemed to outperform him in every task. Even the prestigious project of the mansion garden, belonging to one of the most important businessmen, had been secured by Guyan. Dong stood before his mother in sadness, unable to respond. Yuxian then arrived at Guyan's home to drive him to his destination. After what had happened between them the previous day, she felt a deep sense of awkwardness around him. When Guyan appeared, her nervousness grew so strong that her cheeks flushed red. Seeing her in such a state, Guyan smiled, gently cupped her face, and told her she looked adorable. Just as he leaned closer, Xiao and Gumu entered the house. Gumu, noticing Guyan with Yuxian, smiled brightly, overjoyed that she had finally succeeded in making him fall in love. She then suggested that Yuxian go out with her for a while, leaving Guyan and Xiao to work together. The two women left and got into the car to go shopping, but another car suddenly blocked their way. Gumu stepped out angrily to confront the men, only to be struck on the head and thrown into the trunk. Yuxian rushed out to fight back, but despite her efforts, she was overpowered and also forced into the trunk. Before losing consciousness, she managed to call Guyan and tell him what had happened. Guyan clutched his chest, overwhelmed with pain, then immediately told Xiao. They rushed to the car, but Guyan soon received a call from an unknown number. The caller claimed to have his sister and threatened that unless Guyan gave up the mansion garden project, they would release scandalous videos of her. Guyan knew very well how devastating such a thing would be for her, given that she was a rising actress. Certain that Dong was behind it, Guyan stormed into his company and began attacking him furiously. But Dong, who genuinely had feelings for Gumu, insisted that if he were behind it, he would have only taken Guyan's lover and never harmed Gumu. Guyan believed him and left. Meanwhile, Gumu and Yuxian regained consciousness in a grand, lavish room. Gumu noticed a distinctive sculpture and instantly remembered that Dong had created it. She realized that his family was behind the kidnapping. Yet she refused to reveal this, for she herself harbored feelings for Dong and could not bring herself to hurt him. Yuxian assured Gumu that she had a plan to help them escape. She began banging on the door and shouting that Gumu's condition was critical. When the kidnappers opened the door, Yuxian charged at them, striking each one fiercely until she managed to break free. However, they caught hold of Gumu. Determined to bring help, Yuxian decided to escape alone. As she reached the front door, she saw a car pulling up, and from it stepped Guyan and Dong. She ran straight into Guyan's arms, clinging to him as she explained everything that had happened. Dong, furious, rushed inside to rescue Gumu, while Guyan remained still. Confused, Yuxian asked him why he did not go to save his sister. Guyan calmly explained that Gumu and Dong had feelings for each other, though neither would admit it because of the rivalry between them. He told her that Gumu would be happiest if Dong were the one to save her, then took Yuxian away with him. Inside the room, Gumu threw herself into Dong's arms, crying with relief. She quickly pulled back, however, and accused him, saying she would never have met him again had she not been kidnapped. Dong pretended not to care, claiming he had only come because Guyan had suspected him. But both were hiding the truth of their emotions, unwilling to admit what they really felt. The following day, Dong confronted his mother, demanding to know why she had orchestrated everything. She coldly replied that all she cared about was the project. Disillusioned, Dong called Guyan to tell him that he no longer cared about the mansion garden and that Guyan could have it, as it had nothing to do with him anymore. Yet at Guyan's company, the assistant of the businessman arrived with grim news. Because Guyan had missed the contract signing to rescue the girls, the businessman had withdrawn, refusing to work with their company again. The project was lost. Guilt weighed heavily on Yuxian, convinced that she was the reason for Guyan's loss. After driving Guyan back, Yuxian took the car and went directly to the businessman's office. He sat on a chair with his back turned, his face unseen. Yuxian explained everything to him, recounting the real reason Guyan had been late. She pleaded with him to give Guyan another chance to sign the contract. The men agreed. Overjoyed, Yuxian rushed back to Guyan to tell him the news, that she had secured another opportunity for him. Guyan's heart filled with happiness as he embraced her tightly, thanking her for her help. When the businessman's assistant arrived to see Guyan, he explained that there was one condition for signing the contract. Yuxian had to be present during the signing. Guyan agreed without hesitation, and when they stood before the businessman, he introduced Yuxian as his fiancée, a move that seemed natural since everyone had already seen them together at the hotel. But the shock came when the businessman finally turned around, revealing himself to be Bai Bin. Both Guyan and Yuxian froze in disbelief. Guyan, confused and frustrated, sat opposite Bai Bin and demanded an explanation. and discovered that Bai Bin is actually from a wealthy family, and now it's time to take his family's inheritance. Bai Bin calmly told him that the only thing that mattered to him was Yuxian's happiness. Since she had come to him, begging him to finalize the contract, he would do it for her sake. Though Guyan found it hard to accept, he signed the deal regardless, knowing how important this project would be for his career. Afterwards, Yuxian, Guyan, and Yina went out to celebrate the signing over dinner. While they were eating, Yuxian shared that she would be leaving for a few days to stay with her father, who had fallen ill. Guyan immediately asked to accompany her, but she refused. Her father was a strict, difficult man, and she feared his reaction. Once she left, Guyan found the separation unbearable. Early the next morning, he dragged Xiao into the car, insisting they drive to Yuxian's family home. Xiao protested, pointing out that Guyan hadn't even slept and that his feelings for Yuxian were becoming too much for everyone else to bear. But Guyan, stubborn as ever, refused to listen. Meanwhile, Bai Bin also decided to visit Yuxian at her father's house, concerned for her well-being. He knew the address and wanted to check on her. Just as he arrived, so did Guyan and Xiao. Seeing Bai Bin there ignited Guyan's jealousy, and without waiting for Yuxian's invitation, he stormed into the house. Yuxian panicked, begging him to leave before her father returned, as her father still harbored anger toward Guyan over the past rumors. But Guyan wouldn't go. Moments later, her father walked in to find Guyan standing there. Rage flared in his eyes, but instead of throwing him out, he gathered Guyan, Bai Bin, and Xiao into the living room. Guyan explained everything, the truth behind the rumors, the misunderstandings, and his real intentions. Slowly, Yuxian's father's expression softened. He then turned to Yuxian and Yina, asking them to prepare lunch for everyone. While they were gone, Xiao took the chance to speak warmly about Guyan, about his character, his talents, and the kind of man he truly was. His words painted Guyan in a noble light, though Guyan himself sat in silence, too shy and uneasy to say much in front of Yuxian's father. Guyan sat nervously in the garden, his hands restless as he tried to steady his thoughts. Yuxian approached and asked why he seemed so tense. He admitted that he was worried her father would disapprove of him and stand in the way of their relationship. But Yuxian brushed his fears aside, telling him that her father's opinion did not matter. What mattered was her own feelings. Guyan was left stunned, staring at her in disbelief and asking her to repeat what she had just said. Embarrassed, Yuxian quickly rose and walked away, leaving him in silent shock. Later, they all gathered for lunch. During the meal, Bai Bin made every effort to appear as a reliable and charming young man in front of Yuxian's father. He even extended an invitation for everyone to visit his private resort and enjoy the beach. The group accepted, and before long, they were all laughing, relaxing, and sharing moments of joy under the sun. While swimming, Yina suddenly began to struggle in the water. Xiao rushed to her side, lifted her, and carried her back to safety. Guyan and Yuxian hurried over in panic, watching as Xiao prepared to give her CPR. But Yina sat up abruptly, stopping him with a dismissive gesture. She admitted that she had only been testing him and declared that he had failed, accusing him of being a flirt. Xiao was left dumbfounded, staring at her in disbelief at her foolish reasoning. That evening, after dinner, everyone retired to their rooms. In Guyan and Yuxian's room, Guyan drifted into another dream of Qi as he slept. Yuxian overheard him murmuring words of longing. Concerned, she leaned closer to check on him, but in his unconscious state, he pulled her into his arms and whispered that he couldn't believe he had finally found her. Yuxian froze, her heart sinking with sadness. Convinced that he was speaking about another woman, she gently pulled away and left the room, her emotions heavy. She walked alone to the shore, where she sat in silence, gazing at the sea as the first light of morning began to break. Bai Bin, who happened to be nearby, noticed Yuxian sitting alone and went to her. He asked why she looked so sad, and she confided in him that the night before, Guyan had whispered the name Qi in his sleep. She asked if he knew anything about this mysterious girl. Despite his own feelings for her, Bai Bin promised to be honest and took her to watch a video recorded by Guyan's grandfather. In the recording, the old man spoke of Qi, recounting that thousands of years ago, the family had 4 descendants, the youngest named Shou. One night, Shou dreamed of a girl known as the Winged Fairy, and when he awoke, he sculpted her likeness. That statue became the foundation of the family's legacy in sculpture, earning them renown ever since. No one had ever been able to recreate such a piece again. Yuxian, bewildered, asked what this had to do with her. Bai Bin told her that what he had shared was all he could reveal, and beyond that, the truth was no longer in his hands. Meanwhile, Gumu went to meet Dong, who handed her a lollipop, just as he used to when they were children. He apologized sincerely for the pain and fear his mother had caused her and told her that it would be better if they stopped seeing each other altogether. His presence in her life was a danger because of his family's ruthless ways. From their exchange, it became clear that Gumu, Dong, Guyan, and others had been childhood friends. Feelings had grown between Gumu and Dong, but the rivalry between their families had forced them apart, especially the two of them. Heartbroken, Gumu called Yuxian, who was already planning to take her to the family's private sculpture room to show her the winged fairy statue. Inside the room, Yuxian stared at the statue, stunned by the striking resemblance it bore to her. From her conversation with Gumu, she pieced together Guyan's belief that Yuxian was the winged fairy herself, the one destined to cure the trembling in his hand and restore his ability to sculpt. Gumu, though aware that Guyan truly had feelings for Yuxian, explained it in a clumsy way that left Yuxian deeply shaken. Tears welled in her eyes as she convinced herself that Guyan's every gesture toward her had been out of duty to this legend rather than genuine love. Distraught, she went to Guyan's home and told him she would be moving. As she packed her belongings, Guyan tried to take her suitcase, but she broke down, crying, and revealed that she had learned the truth. She also announced her resignation, determined to walk away from everything. Elsewhere, Yuan arrived at the company where Lin Wan worked as a journalist, having applied for a photographer position. To his dismay, he discovered that they were looking to hire him only as an assistant, someone responsible for menial tasks and errands. He was frustrated, unsure how he could ever prove himself under those conditions. Determined, he approached Lin Wan, one of the top reporters at the company, and confided in her about the situation. He asked if he could work as her personal assistant instead of serving under someone else. Intrigued, Lin Wan agreed, warning him to be ready, as they already had their first assignment together that very evening, covering an important party. When Bai Bin learned what had happened between Yuxian and Guyan, he decided to seize the opportunity. He approached Yuxian and invited her to attend a party with him, presenting her with a hairpin as a token of his admiration. Though Yuxian was still wounded by her disappointment with Guyan, she felt uneasy about Bai Bin's overly forward advances. At the party, Guyan and Xiao were present as well, and the moment Guyan saw Yuxian arrive with Bai Bin, jealousy surged within him. He went straight to her, but when Yuxian refused to leave Bai Bin's side, Guyan forcefully pulled her into the garden. There, he confessed his love for her. Yuxian, however, reproached him for everything that had happened and told him she could not accept his feelings because she did not trust either him or his true intentions. Guyan insisted that his love was real, that he loved her for who she was and not for anything else. Nearby, Lin Wan overheard their exchange, her heart breaking since she herself had harbored feelings for Guyan. Yuan, standing behind her, noticed her tears. He handed her a bottle of wine, urging her not to cry over such things and promising that he would be there to support her, just as she had supported him by letting him work with her. Yuxian returned to the party still feeling disheartened, but Guyan refused to let her go. He followed her, pulled her onto the dance floor, and held her close as he confessed his love for the third time. He asked her directly if she would respond to his confession, reminding her that she had once admitted her feelings back at her father's house. Before Yuxian could say anything, she suddenly collapsed in his arms. In her unconscious state, she saw a vivid vision of her mother, dancing in old-fashioned clothes before a stage light stand fell upon her, killing her instantly, while no one around intervened. Guyan, alarmed, called Xiao because even the following morning Yuxian had not regained consciousness. Xiao, however, awoke to an entirely different shock. He opened his eyes to find himself lying in bed beside Yina. Memories of the previous night flooded back. They had both been drunk, and somehow ended up together. When Yina woke, she screamed in panic, and Xiao screamed as well, both horrified by what had happened. Still shaken, they decided to rush to the hospital after receiving Guyan's call. There, Yina pressed Guyan for answers. He explained that Yuxian had fainted while dancing with him the night before. Yina then revealed the truth. Yuxian suffered from a psychological trauma related to dancing. Her mother had died on stage in front of her while performing, crushed by a fallen light stand, and ever since, whenever Yuxian danced, the memories triggered seizures that caused her to collapse. It became clear that what Yuxian had seen in her vision was not a dream at all but a real fragment of her past. Not long after, Yuan arrived at the hospital to check on her, which immediately stirred Guyan's jealousy and anger as he remembered seeing him with Yuxian before. But Yuan introduced himself properly as her younger brother, which brought Guyan a sense of relief. Soon after, Yuxian's entire family arrived, anxious and concerned, filling the hospital room with their presence. Guyan returned to his home and went straight to the sculpture room. After a great deal of effort, he finally managed to carve something, a hairpin, identical to the one he had seen himself giving to Kai in his dream. Yet since that day, he had not visited Yuxian again. Instead, he only sent her messages, afraid of her father's disapproval. Still, Guyan insisted that she give him an answer to his confession of love, but Yuxian refused to respond for the time being. The next day, Yuxian decided to visit her therapist, the one helping her cope with the trauma of her mother's death. She was shocked to find Guyan there, realizing that this was his therapist as well. As they both stood frozen in disbelief, Lin Wan entered the office. She was a close friend of the therapist, and while the therapist was outside with Guyan and Yuxian, Lin Wan slipped into the room, opened the laptop, searched for Guyan's name, and copied all his records onto her own device. The following morning, Yuxian met with Bai Bin and returned the hairpin he had given her, telling him that she valued him deeply as a dear friend. Bai Bin understood from her words that she was rejecting his feelings. At that moment, Guyan appeared, took Yuxian by the hand, and led her out of the restaurant. He brought her to the place filled with statues, stopping in front of one in particular, the statue known as the fairy. Guyan explained to her that Cho, the man who had drawn this girl after seeing her in a dream, had written a will pass down for 1,000 years. In it, he declared that whoever found the fairy must protect her with all their strength. Guyan told Yuxian that she was the one who resembled this fairy, and that ever since his accident, he had dreamed of her every night, always protecting her. But he made it clear that his love had nothing to do with any legend, he loved her for who she was. Yuxian smiled at his words. Then Guyan revealed the hairpin he had sculpted especially for her and gently placed it in her hair, just as he had seen in his dream. Yuxian leaned in and kissed him happily, declaring that they were now officially together. Soon after, Guyan received a call from Lin Wan, asking to meet with him. When he arrived, she demanded that he break up with Yuxian and be with her instead, threatening to leak his stolen medical records to the media. She warned that if the truth came out, that he had not been able to sculpt since his accident, the company's stock would collapse. Guyan, however, told her that her threats were useless, because he genuinely loved Yuxian. Crushed by his words, Lin Wan told him that she no longer cared about him and had no intention of being with him. She left, only to break down in tears outside. Yuan approached her with a handkerchief, trying to comfort her. In her despair, Lin Wan asked him to take her to a nightclub, insisting she wanted to drink. After becoming intoxicated, she began talking bitterly about Guyan's inability to sculpt. By chance, a journalist overheard and tried to persuade her into giving him an interview to expose Guyan's condition. But Lin Wan refused, saying she would never betray him, and tried to push the reporter away. When he persisted, Yuan intervened and pulled her aside, taking her to a karaoke bar instead. There, Lin Wan sang with deep sorrow before suddenly leaning in to kiss Yuan. Realizing what she had done, she quickly pushed him away and fled the place in confusion. Meanwhile, Yuxian was still staying at her father's house, where he had been keeping a close eye on her ever since her time in the hospital. He entered her room, telling her that he felt she was unwell and made it clear that he did not approve of her relationship with Guyan. Yuxian reassured him that his real fear was of losing her, but promised she was there with him and that what he dreaded would never happen. The next morning, Guyan called to check on her. When Yuxian told him she was feeling a little unwell, he rushed to her home to see her. Overwhelmed with joy when she saw him, Yuxian tried to hide him before her father could notice. But it was too late. Her father entered the room and caught them together. Yuxian's father grabbed a frying pan, holding it as if to threaten Guyan, and forced him to sit on the chair in front of him. He demanded to know why Guyan had come. Guyan explained that he was only there to check on Yuxian's health, since she had told him she was unwell, and he had even brought her medicine. Yuxian's father opened Guyan's bag and found stomach pain relievers, alongside a pregnancy test. Shocked, he stared at Guyan, who quickly swore that the pharmacist, upon hearing he wanted medicine for his girlfriend, had assumed she was pregnant and gave him the test on her own. At that moment, Yuxian looked at her father and declared that she and Guyan loved each other and were already in a relationship. Powerless against her determination, her father reluctantly accepted their bond at last. Meanwhile, Lin Wan summoned Yuan to her office, threatening that if anyone ever found out what had happened between them at the nightclub, she would make his work life miserable. After intimidating him, she sent him back to his duties. Soon after, Yuxian's father decided to return to his village, asking his daughter to take care of herself and requesting that Guyan do the same. Once he left, Yuxian returned to Guyan's home, and for the first time, the two were able to spend the night alone together, overjoyed by the rare chance to share such closeness. The next day, Yuan called Guyan with a proposition. He wanted to photograph Guyan for a magazine cover, promising that if Guyan agreed, he would secure a permanent position as a photographer at the company. For Yuxian's sake, Guyan accepted and attended the photo shoot. Not long afterward, rumors spread, claiming that he was ill and no longer capable of sculpting. Guyan immediately suspected Lin Wan, but she swore she had nothing to do with it and told him everything about the incident with the journalist at the nightclub. Understanding that she wasn't directly responsible, Guyan chose to forgive her, telling her that he still valued their friendship. To put the rumors to rest, he even agreed to give her an exclusive interview, the first time he had ever done so. The following day, Guyan took Yuxian to an exhibition. There, they ran into Gumu and Dong, who were finally out on their very first date after Dong had promised to protect her from the dangers of his family. When the group gathered together, the tension quickly rose between Guyan and Dong, as both were preparing to compete in the upcoming golden sculpture competition the following month. Each of them boldly declared that he would be the one to win, sparking a heated rivalry, while the girls sat back and watched the two men challenge one another with fiery determination. The next day, a girl went to Guyan's office. She was Gumu's friend, and through her, she became acquainted with Guyan and Xiao. She mentioned that she knew a man who worked in collecting gemstones and could arrange a meeting for Guyan to buy some stones and carve them. Guyan went to the appointment with Yuxian by his side, while Gumu's friend also joined them, casting strange glances at Yuxian. At one point, Guyan noticed a particular stone and asked the men for it, but the men agreed to give it to him only on one condition, that Guyan would arrange the gemstones according to their rarity by himself. Guyan accepted the challenge without hesitation. During that time, Gumu's friend sat with Yuxian and began criticizing her, pointing out that she did not seem suitable for Guyan at all. She emphasized that Yuxian was not highly educated like him, had never traveled outside of China, and seemed to be beneath him in every way. But Yuxian responded firmly, making it clear that since she was his sister's friend, Guyan would always see her as nothing more than a sister, so her petty attempts were meaningless and foolish. Later, when Yuxian returned home, she began questioning Guyan about his sister's friend, wondering about their connection and why she had even come to visit him in the first place. Guyan looked at her and asked if she was jealous. Yuxian did not deny it, and Guyan gazed at her with love, assuring her that he loved no one but her. He then carried her in his arms and took her inside. Meanwhile, Guyan's mother, Dong, continued investigating Yuxian, trying to uncover more about her origins and family. As for Gumu's friend, she later met Guyan again to hand him an invitation to one of the special carving events. When they were all sitting together, Guyan began talking with Yina about gemstones and carving. Yuxian felt uneasy and sad, realizing she understood nothing about that world and did not share Guyan's interests. For the first time, she felt inferior to him. Excusing herself, she left for the bathroom, only to be followed by Gumu's friend, who warned her not to feel too confident, claiming that Guyan would soon grow tired of her and eventually leave her for a girl who truly resembled him and shared his passions. Yuxian felt anger rising inside her. Yuxian went to Yina in a state of deep frustration, seeking comfort, and soon began drinking until she was completely intoxicated. While with her, Yina received a call informing her that her mother had fallen ill, so she quickly phoned Bai Bin, asking him to come for Yuxian since she was upset with Guyan. Afterward, Yina left, and before long, Bai Bin arrived. Yuxian, overwhelmed with sadness, began pouring out everything that had happened. Bai Bin felt pity for her, yet despite that, he carried her himself to Guyan's home, explaining that she had been with Yina and he had only escorted her there. Once with Guyan, Yuxian began to share her feelings and complaints, and he embraced her, reassuring her that he loved her as she was and that she never needed to change in order to feel worthy of him. Meanwhile, Yuan was at Lin Wan's home, taking care of her and even preparing food. He urged her to forget about Guyan, confessing that he had feelings for her and wanted to be with her. However, Lin Wan rejected him, reminding him that she was 6 years older and they could never be together. He insisted that it did not matter to him, but she responded that it mattered to her, before walking away. Later, Yuxian and Lin Wan decided to create a plan to increase sales at the flower shop. Yuxian called Yuan, teasing him about his good looks and how women flocked to him, insisting that he come stand at the shop to attract more customers. Lin Wan overheard him on the phone with another girl, saying he would come for her, and immediately grew suspicious. She followed him by car until they both arrived at the flower shop, where she saw him embracing Yuxian. Since she still did not know his true identity, she felt a surge of jealousy and anger, convincing herself that Yuxian was stealing all the men around her. When Guyan came to the flower shop, he mentioned to Yuan that Lin Wan had been outside and asked why she had not come in with him. Yuan was shocked, fearing she had misunderstood him, and rushed to her home. He knocked on the door, begging her to listen so he could explain why he had gone to Yuxian's shop, but Lin Wan was furious and refused to open, despite having been the one to reject his feelings only the day before. The following day, a worker from the magazine approached Yuan, telling him that the scheduled model had failed to appear, and they urgently needed photos. Since he was handsome, they wanted him to step in instead. He went for the shoot, and Yuxian accompanied him, driven by jealousy, especially when she noticed the female model trying to get closer to him. Unable to hide her anger, Lin Wan left them and returned to her office. Yuan followed her inside, asking why she was upset and swearing that Yuxian was his sister. Confused, she asked whether he meant Yuxian was like a sister or truly his sister. To prove it, he showed her his birth certificate, confirming that Yuxian was indeed his real sister. At that moment, he confronted her about her jealousy, and Lin Wan finally admitted it. At last, she agreed to date him, and the two officially became a couple. After that, everyone went to an important party where Xiao met Yina once again. He repeated his request for her to become his girlfriend, but she firmly maintained her refusal. At the same time, Yuxian approached Gumu to ask about Guyan, and Gumu told her that Guyan had gone up to his hotel room and was waiting for her there. Meanwhile, Gumu went to her own room, which she had decorated with balloons and red roses. She called Dong and asked him to come. When he arrived, she once again begged him to make their relationship official instead of continuing to meet by chance from time to time. But Dong insisted that being together would put her in danger, then left her and walked away. At that very moment, Yuxian was heading toward Guyan's room when she saw Gumu's friend running from the same direction, crying, adjusting her clothes, and looking distraught. Suspicion immediately filled Yuxian's mind. She went into Guyan's room and found him wearing his jacket. Gumu's plan had succeeded. Yuxian was convinced something had happened. She scolded Guyan through her tears and stormed out of the room, while Guyan was left confused, not understanding what had just happened. As Yuxian wept, a mysterious figure suddenly appeared from behind and pushed her into the swimming pool. Just before she drowned, Guyan, who had been following her to try and talk, rushed in and pulled her out. Instead of gratitude, Yuxian blamed him, claiming she had seen Gumu's friend leaving his room. Guyan swore to her that the woman had tried to seduce him and begged him to be with her, but he had rejected her completely, telling her that he loved only Yuxian. That was why she had been crying when she left. When Guyan swore this was the truth, Yuxian believed him immediately and reconciled with him. The next day, Guyan and Yuxian went together to the sculpture room, standing before the statue of the fairy, dressed in traditional dance attire. Guyan told her that he often looked at the statue because he wanted to draw inspiration, just as his great-grandfather once had. Yuxian told him that his ancestor must have found his inspiration after seeing the fairy dance in his dream. Quietly, she thought to herself that perhaps if she could learn traditional dance, she might inspire Guyan in the same way. Determined, she resolved to confront her old fears connected to dancing and began serious treatment so she could learn, all for Guyan's sake. Yuxian decided to go to the very theater where her mother had died, the same place where they used to dance. There, she met her childhood friend, who had become a professional traditional dancer after being inspired by Yuxian's father. He promised to help her learn to dance again, and Yuxian chose to keep the matter hidden from Guyan. Meanwhile, at Lin Wan's company, employees began to notice the relationship between her and Yuan. They gossiped maliciously, pointing out the age difference and claiming that Yuan was only with her, a woman 6 years older, for the sake of her position. Lin Wan, however, silenced them immediately, forbidding them from speaking further. Soon after, Guyan began to sense that something unusual was going on with Yuxian. He called Xiao and confided that he planned to follow her that day, as she had been acting differently for some time, going to many places without him, and he had even seen a young man come to take her. When they followed her, they discovered that she was at a dance studio, training with the young men. Guyan was overcome with jealousy and confronted her, but when he learned that she was learning to dance for his sake, his jealousy gave way to gratitude and appreciation. At that moment, Xiao noticed Yuxian and asked her to deliver a message to Yina, telling her that he could not wait any longer. Though Yuxian did not understand, he insisted that Yina would. Elsewhere, Lin Wan went out on a date with Yuan, but someone, seemingly from inside the company, secretly photographed them. Within hours, the images spread, fueling rumors about the journalist and her photographer, with everyone focused on the 6-year age gap. Choosing wisdom over anger, Lin Wan decided to take control of the situation and asked Yuan to announce their relationship publicly, leaving no room for gossip. Meanwhile, Guyan went to pick up Yuxian from the dance studio. Before entering, he overheard her dance partner telling her that the theater troupe would soon be disbanded due to financial troubles, as no audiences attended the performances anymore and salaries could no longer be paid. Determined, Guyan immediately called Xiao and asked him to find the company responsible for the theater so he could invest in it, for Yuxian's sake. At the same time, Dong's mother was plotting yet another scheme to harm Guyan, but this time Dong stood firmly against her, warning that if she dared to approach Guyan or Gumu, he would stop her himself, regardless of the fact that she was his mother. On the other side of the story, there was a rehearsal for the upcoming performance in which Yuxian would dance. She sat in the dressing room with Yina, and when Xiao heard, he came there as well. Taking advantage of the situation, he once again begged Yina to be with him, only for her to reject him once more, just as she had countless times before. When Yuxian stepped onto the stage to perform her rehearsal, it became clear that someone was attempting to kill her in the same way her mother had died. A lighting rig was deliberately loosened, falling toward her, but at the last second Guyan rushed forward, pushing her out of harm's way. The rig crashed down onto his back instead. Guyan was rushed to the hospital while everyone around him wept in fear and despair. When the doctor finally emerged from the room, he explained that Guyan still had hope of waking from the coma he had slipped into, but no one could predict what his condition would be if he did. Days passed, and Guyan remained unconscious. Meanwhile, Dong confronted his mother about what had happened, and she admitted the truth, that she had been responsible. Yet she claimed she had never meant to harm Guyan or Gumu, as she had promised. She only wanted Guyan to suffer grief over losing his beloved. Dong shouted at her in anger, warning that if she did not surrender herself to the police, she would never find peace again. At last, Guyan awoke from his coma, but the shock came when the doctors revealed that he had suffered short-term memory loss. All the recent months of his life were gone from his mind. That meant he no longer remembered Yuxian at all, since she had only entered his life during that time. Refusing to give up, Yuxian followed him everywhere, trying relentlessly to make him remember her. Elsewhere, Guyan's grandfather met with Dong's mother and presented her with evidence of her crime. He threatened that if she did not turn herself in, he would destroy her completely. For the first time, Dong's mother broke down in tears, insisting that her son was innocent and had no part in any of this. The grandfather told her that Gumu herself had already begged him not to involve Dong because he was blameless, but if she refused to confess, he would ruin her entire family. Yuxian, on the other hand, went to Guyan every single day, attempting to restore his memory through endless efforts. Yet Guyan failed to recall her at all. He did not even remember the dreams in which he had once seen Qi. Meanwhile, Dong locked himself away inside his home, refusing to come out. His mother stood outside the door, knocking and pleading to be let in. She reminded him that he bore no fault for what had happened, and that his friend was safe now. At last, Dong could no longer endure the weight of it all. He opened the door, embraced his mother tightly, and broke down in tears, apologizing for all that she had suffered because of his own mother's actions. Later, Yuxian met with Bai Bin and confided everything that had taken place. Bai Bin revealed to her the remainder of the fairy story. He explained that it had actually been Guyan's great-grandfather, not his grandfather, who had seen the fairy in his dream. An agreement had once been struck between the two families, for there existed a mysterious power within Guyan's bloodline that allowed them to sense danger. The pact dictated that whoever encountered the fairy, and possessed this gift of sensing danger, was destined to protect her. That chosen person would always bear a birthmark. Yuxian recalled then that she had indeed seen such a mark on Guyan's body before. The following day, Yuxian went to Guyan as usual to remind him of herself. This time, however, she grew bolder, determined to confirm the presence of the birthmark. To her surprise, she could not find it. Guyan held her hand, believing her to be inappropriate, but Yuxian paid no attention and continued to search, only to find nothing. Guyan tried to drive her away, but she refused to leave. Instead, she stayed in his house, preparing the food he used to love, doing everything she could to get closer to him and remind him of who she was. Yet all of her efforts were in vain. During this time, Bai Bin once again attempted to get closer to Yuxian. He confessed his love to her anew, but she rejected him as well, telling him she no longer wished to be with Guyan nor with anyone else. Bai Bin insisted that he would remain by her side until she was able to overcome what she was going through, and promised that he would tell her the rest of the story of the nymph, her origin, and everything about her. He told Yuxian that the nymph had once been the daughter of an important military man, a girl of remarkable beauty. At 16, she performed a dance called the Soaring Nymph, and when a painter saw her, he was so captivated that he painted her portrait, even creating a sculpture in her honor. He fell deeply in love with her and wanted to marry her. Yet war broke out between her country and another, and she was forced to marry the commander of the opposing army as a gesture of peace between the two nations. Though she became his wife, she did not truly love him and treated him only as a friend, bound to him for the sake of peace. Bai Bin revealed that he had been that husband in a past life, while she had been the nymph, Qi, and Guyan had been the painter who once loved her. Hearing this story, Yuxian resolved not to repeat Qi's mistake. She decided to stay by Guyan's side, vowing never to leave him even if he had no memory of her. When they stepped outside, however, Bai Bin was waiting, still longing for a chance with Yuxian, especially since Guyan's forgetfulness wounded her. Yet despite his lack of memory, Guyan felt a strong pull toward her. Because of this, Xiao decided to help and took Guyan to the theater where the accident had happened. Once there, Guyan's head began to ache as memories came rushing back one by one with such intensity that he collapsed and was rushed to the hospital. When Guyan was finally discharged, he had regained all his memories, though he chose not to reveal this to Yuxian immediately. He wanted to enjoy her earnest attempts to draw closer to him. But this time, Yuxian noticed something different. She told him she could see a smile on his lips, and she was certain he remembered her. After that came the day of the competition. Dong and Gumu appeared together, as did Guyan and Yuxian, and it became clear that Guyan and Dong had finally reconciled. Each of them was confident he would be the one to win. When the results were announced, however, Dong was declared the winner, and his joy was immense. Guyan, on the other hand, felt disheartened, especially when it was revealed that Bai Bin had tampered with the results. After the competition, Bai Bin met Guyan and confessed to manipulating the outcome, promising to restore his title and prize if Guyan would return the painting of the nymph to him. Guyan told him he had no concern for the competition and, in truth, was glad for Dong's victory. He refused to take the prize from him again. As for Qi, he had a dream in which she revealed to him that she was not Yuxian, and that his constant worry over her was nothing more than an illusion born of his belief that she was. She told him the past had to be forgotten, as none of them were true reincarnations of those three figures. Each had only been influenced by the old story. Yuxian, in fact, was the only one untouched by it, since she had never known it at all and had lived her life naturally. Bai Bin then decided to leave China, unable to bear his sorrow any longer. Before his departure, he went one last time to the sculptures to bid them farewell. There, Guyan's grandfather appeared and handed him the painting on Guyan's behalf. Later, Xiao and Yina were seen together at last, as he had finally succeeded in winning her over. The series ended with Guyan presenting a ring to Yuxian and asking her to become his wife. Yuxian accepted, while everyone around them rejoiced and celebrated. Even Bai Bin was there, joining in the happiness sincerely and wholeheartedly.